Hello, Wansi. You can just call me Vold, short for Voldemort. I never actually thought I would have a story to send you. This happened not long ago at my school, and it's one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me. Me and 5 of my friends were skipping part of the lesson because we couldn't be bothered staying in class. And we went near the back of the school field, where there are bushes and trees near this fence. People go there sometimes because teachers barely check it, and it's quiet there. We were just talking normally and messing around when one of my friends suddenly stopped walking and looked ahead. I thought he was joking at first, but then I saw it too. There was this homeless guy sitting by the bushes with bags all around him and random rubbish on the ground. He looked rough as hell, like dirty ripped clothes, a huge beard, dirty yellow teeth, and he smelled bad, even from kind of far away. At first, he didn't notice us. He was just muttering to himself while looking through one of his bags. Then he looked up at us and started smiling. But it didn't even look normal because his teeth were so dirty and messed up. One of my friends laughed awkwardly and said, "Let's just go." But before we even moved properly, the homeless guy stood up and picked up this axe that was sitting next to him on the ground. The axe looked horrible, rusty and dirty, with marks all over the blade and bits of dirt stuck to it. The guy wasn't even holding it normally either. He was kind of dragging it while walking toward us slowly. He kept mumbling stuff under his breath, and we couldn't fully hear him, but it sounded creepy as hell. I remember one of my friends saying, "Why does he even have that?" And that's when the homeless guy suddenly shouted something at us. I couldn't even make out what he said, but it made all of us panic instantly, and we just started running back toward the school. I looked back once while running, and he was still there near the bushes, staring at us with the axe hanging down by his side. When we got back inside, we told the teachers there was a homeless guy outside with an axe. At first, they thought we were exaggerating, until one teacher went outside to check. After that, the police arrived very quickly, and everyone at school started talking about it. Apparently, the guy had been staying near the field for a few days, and nobody realized. The creepiest part for me is still the way he smiled at us, because he looked completely normal at first, until he stood up with the axe. I don't have a picture of the exact location, but I can tell you roughly where this happened. I took this from my school site. I lived at my grandparents' house with my younger brother. Let's call him Odie. It was New Year's Eve 12 years ago, and truly the best festive atmosphere. The yard was filled with the aroma of grilled pork belly, the sound of uncles laughing between sips of beer, and the ceaseless popping of firecrackers in the street. My brother and I ran around with our cousins, ate sweet spaghetti, and had a blast playing with the plastic horns we'd been blowing all night long. Around 11:30 p.m., my aunt called the children into the living room and told them to open their presents. The living room was packed with people and bustling, with wrapping paper flying everywhere. Amidst the excitement, I realized my brother was no longer by my side. Thinking Odie had gone to the kitchen to get more soda, I left the noisy living room and set out to look for him. As soon as I entered the back hallway, party noise seemed to suddenly fade into the distance. The kitchen was empty, and the back door leading to my cousin's dark, weed-covered backyard was wide open. "Odie!" I called out to Odie by her nickname. I stepped out to the front door. Red and green fireworks twinkled in the distance, casting long, irregular shadows across the lawn. Then I saw Odie. My younger brother was standing near the boundary where the house lights ended and the tall weeds began. Odie was holding a wrapped gift box and looking up at the tall mango tree. "Odie, come inside. It's almost midnight," I shouted as I stepped down onto the lawn. Odie didn't turn around, but pointed to a dark branch of the tree. "Kuya, look. A tall man gave me a toy." My mind went blank. I looked up. A man was crouching on a thick tree branch, completely hidden by leaves, barely visible only when the fireworks exploded. He was astonishingly thin, his skin pale, and he wore a dirty, tattered shirt. With a wide grin, a smile that revealed his teeth, he looked straight down at my younger brother. A huge firework exploded overhead, suddenly painting the yard in an intense red. The man slowly brought his long, bony fingers to his lips, signaling for silence. In his other hand, he held a heavy, rusty garden knife perched on the branch. Before I could even scream, the midnight countdown rang out inside the house. 10, 9, 8. Then the man suddenly fell from the branch and landed silently on the lawn right in front of my brother. Outside, the countdown instantly turned into screams. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. And the ear-splitting sound of fireworks shook the ground. Amid the deafening explosion, the man rushed forward and grabbed my brother's arm. Instinctively, I didn't run inside the house. Instead, I screamed with all my might. I ran across the wet lawn and threw a plastic party horn at the man's face. The horn hit him squarely in the eye. He hissed, briefly let go of my brother, and clutched his face. I gripped Odie's hand tightly and ran with all my might toward the bright, safe light of the kitchen veranda. We hurriedly rushed inside, slammed the heavy wooden door shut, and locked it. Just then, a loud thud echoed from outside the door. I ran into the living room and, crying, dragged Odie into the crowd of relatives. "There's a man in the yard. He tried to take Odie away," I shouted over the loud music. The festive atmosphere vanished in an instant. Uncles ran out to the backyard with flashlights and heavy sticks, and aunts locked all the windows. However, while they were scouring the area around the tall weeds and mango trees, the man was gone. All that remained was the gift box he had given to my younger brother. Grandfather carefully unwrapped the package, only to find no toys inside. There were only a few rusty, sharp nails and a handful of dirt from a freshly dug grave. 11 years have passed since that night in 2015, but my brother and I have never forgotten it. Every year on New Year's Eve, while everyone else admires the beautiful fireworks illuminating the sky, my brother and I stay inside, our eyes fixed on the dark windows. This is because we know how easily a monster can hide amidst the noise. Hi, my name is Al. This story took place back in 2013 when I was 15 years old and visiting my grandparents' house. Every summer, my dad's whole family would gather there, so I didn't always get to see my cousins, aunts, and uncles. Their house was about a 3-hour drive from ours and had 3 floors. The first floor was mostly for storage, filled with sacks of rice. It had a staircase leading to the second floor, where the kitchen, bedrooms, and living room were. From there, another staircase went up to the third floor, which always gave me an unsettling feeling. The house was clean and well kept, but the atmosphere felt strange in a way I couldn't explain. The third floor especially creeped me out. It was dusty, cluttered with boxes, and looked more like an unfinished rooftop space. Oddly enough, there were always 2 small beds up there, even though no one used them. One night around 2 a.m., I woke up thirsty and decided to get some water. Before I stood up, I glanced at my family. Some were in bed, others sleeping on the floor. Just as I was about to open the door, I heard a telephone ringing from outside. It continued ringing even as I stepped out of the room. The phone was near the living room TV, and when I got closer, I realized it wasn't even plugged in. It had been broken for a while. I remembered my grandparents had unplugged it for that reason. I was already unnerved, but I continued to the kitchen for water. After drinking, I turned around, and that's when I saw her, a woman in white, hair covering her face, floating. I froze as she silently moved from the second floor to the third. Her movement was both fast and slow, as if time were warped. When she vanished, I bolted back to the room. Shaken and unsure whether to cry or wake my mom, I eventually just forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I told my aunt what happened, and her reply shocked me. She said they used to see the same figure when they lived in the house. Though it still scared them, they had learned to live with it. To this day, I don't know exactly what I saw, and after that experience, I have never returned to my grandparents' house.
Hello, Wanzi. I've been watching your videos since COVID, and I finally built up the courage to share one of the scariest experiences of my life. My name is Ezra, and this happened when I was 17 years old. At the time, I lived in Redwood City, California, in a decent-sized neighborhood. Before I start, there are a few important details about me. I'm a 5'8" Native American man with pale skin and long, straight, black hair that reaches my lower back. I usually wear it in a single braid. My girlfriend at the time was also white and had black hair down to the middle of her back, a little shorter than mine. Another important detail is that our living room had a glass door leading directly to the patio and swimming pool. That evening, my mom, my girlfriend, and I were hanging out in the living room. I was sitting on the floor while my girlfriend braided my hair, and my mom was sitting on the couch talking with us. We were all excited because we were getting ready for our 3-year anniversary date. Every anniversary, my girlfriend and I had a tradition where we wore matching outfits. Dress shirts, dress pants, vests, and the same braided hairstyle. Everything felt perfect. Then suddenly, a loud knock slammed against the door. It scared all of us. My girlfriend said she'd investigate while my mom offered to finish braiding my hair so we could leave faster. Since my mom was doing my hair, I couldn't really get up, but I watched my girlfriend open the door. Standing there was a scruffy-looking man. He was tall, around 6 feet, with a balding head, wearing a dirty gray sweater, jeans, and thick work boots. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I could tell they were arguing. Then my girlfriend suddenly slammed the door in his face and walked back over to us. When I asked what happened, she told me the man said he had been watching her through the window. Then he told her, "I wanted to do so many things to you." Hearing that instantly pissed me off. I wanted to call the police, but my girlfriend told me to ignore it. She said creeps like that weren't uncommon around here, and by then, he had already driven away. I still wanted to report him, but she convinced me to just focus on our date. A little later, my mom finished braiding my hair, and we were finally ready to leave. That's when I realized something. I forgot to buy my girlfriend a gift. Not wanting to admit that, I lied and told her I forgot my Polaroid camera at a friend's house and wanted to grab it before dinner. In reality, I was walking to Costco, which was only about a 7-minute walk away, to quickly buy some jewelry as a last-minute gift. Nothing happened on the way there, but by the time I was walking back home, it was already dark outside. About halfway home, I was distracted, trying to think of an excuse for why I couldn't find the Polaroid. Then suddenly, someone grabbed my braid from behind and yanked it so hard my head snapped backward. Pain shot through my neck. Then I heard a cold voice whisper in my ear, "I'm gonna do so many things to you." My stomach dropped instantly. It was the same man, the creep who had come to our house earlier. Then he laughed softly into my hair and licked my neck. I don't know what came over me, but I elbowed him hard in the stomach and took off running toward my house. When I looked back, he was chasing me, and he was close. Only a few feet behind me. Luckily, I could already see my house ahead. I sprinted through the patio gate and ran toward the glass door. But before I could reach it, he grabbed my braid again. I shoved backward as hard as I could, and both of us fell straight into the swimming pool. The water was freezing cold. Before I could even process what happened, he climbed on top of me, still gripping my braid, and started forcing my head underwater. I fought as hard as I could. I kicked, thrashed, and clawed at him while trying desperately to surface. Every time I managed to gasp for air, I screamed before he shoved me back under again. My lungs burned. My vision started fading. I genuinely thought I was about to die. Then suddenly, he let go. For a split second, I saw his head slam against the side of the pool. Then everything went black. The next thing I remember was my girlfriend pulling me upward and helping me resurface. Still gasping for air in the pool, my mom and girlfriend explained what happened. They had heard my screams from inside the house. When they ran outside and saw the man trying to drown me, my girlfriend grabbed a baseball bat and hit him in the back of the head while my mom called 911. Then my girlfriend jumped into the pool to pull me up. The police arrived soon after and arrested the man. I was too shaken to even get out of the pool. I just sat there while my girlfriend held me. A few weeks later, a police officer came to our house and told me something that still gives me chills. The man who attacked me was actually a predator the police had been trying to catch. And the terrifying part? He never wanted me. He wanted my girlfriend. Because it was dark and because we had matching outfits and matching braids, he mistook me for her. The police later confirmed he had already assaulted 5 girls before that night. My girlfriend was supposed to be the 6th. Ever since then, my mom has begged me to cut my hair, but I refuse because my wife still loves it. Yeah, wife. I'm 27 now, and I married the same girl. But even after all these years, I still think about that night. Even now, it still gives me goosebumps.
Hello. I would like to share a story my grandma told me when I was a kid. We live in Brazil. My sister and I were talking about ghosts and other stories we heard in the dining room. That's when my grandma came over to us and told us a story about my uncle when he was a kid. At that time, it was pretty safe to let your kid go to school or go home alone. My uncle was going home after a full day at school. It was pretty dark, and he was alone. During his walk, the only thing he could hear was the sound of his keys shaking inside his backpack. They were so loud that one day he was robbed because the thieves thought the keys jingling was the sound of coins. Anyway, he was walking normally until he decided to look behind him because he had this feeling he was being followed. That's when he saw a figure standing not so far away from him. Because of it, he could see what the figure looked like, and it was definitely not human. Their face was weird, and their skin color was gray. But the most prominent part of their appearance was the fact that it had no lower part of their legs, only the upper part. My uncle, of course, was scared, but kept going, thinking it was just his imagination. He kept looking behind to see if the creature was there, and it was. At one point, he couldn't see the creature anymore because he was walking down a hill. The only thing he could hear was the sound of his keys. Again, at one point, he decided to look behind him one last time, and that's when he saw the creature running towards him, using its arms, and it was surprisingly fast. My uncle immediately started sprinting as fast as he could. He didn't dare look behind him again, and unfortunately, couldn't even hear the sound of the creature, only the sound of his keys. Eventually, he arrived at the street his house was on. My grandma was waiting for him outside the house. She saw my uncle running and screaming something. He was probably warning my grandma about the creature. When he finally reached my grandma, he looked behind him and saw no one. My grandma told us that the moment she saw my uncle, she saw no one following him. My uncle told my grandpa, my mom, my aunt, and her about what happened. Surprisingly, she believed him because she thinks a demon was following him that night. And who knows what could have happened to my uncle if he hadn't been paying attention to his surroundings. I normally don't believe these stories, but I found this one interesting and decided to share it with you. Take care. My name is Rebecca, and I'd like to share something that happened to me when I was about 12 years old. Every Thursday or Friday, my mom would go to the laundromat because we didn't have a washer or dryer at our house at the time. I really didn't like staying home with my sisters since it was boring, so I always tagged along with my mom to help her. Even if it was just as boring, at least I always got snacks for going, so a win was a win. One Thursday evening, my mom was super busy, so we ended up going to the laundromat pretty late. Since the laundromat was located in a rundown neighborhood, it was a bit scary during that time of day. But since I'd been there multiple times at night, it wasn't that scary. Everything started the same, helping my mom load clothes into the washer, nothing out of the ordinary. Afterward, I started to get a bit hungry, like I always do, so I asked my mom if she could give me some money to buy snacks at the gas station. She handed me $10, and I left. The gas station wasn't too far, and since I'd always go alone, it was normal. This time, however, I felt an odd feeling, but I shrugged it off. I walked into the gas station and grabbed chips and a drink. I started to leave, but an old rusty truck caught my eye for some reason. I squinted and saw a middle-aged man with a slight beard. He was staring straight at a brick wall, but when he saw me, he made the widest smile I'd ever seen. I thought he was being nice, so I smiled back. But as I began to walk away, he followed me with his eyes. My heart sank. I bolted to the laundromat, and as I looked back, I could still see the man staring at me with the same smile on his face. As I made it to the laundromat, I could still see the truck, though only slightly, and I felt a bit safe. I opened my chips and began eating. As I was finishing my chips, I saw him enter, with the same face, still staring at me. Chills went up my spine. I took my eyes off of him to ease me and decided to look out the window I was sitting behind. To my horror, the man had parked in front of where I was eating. As soon as he saw my mom coming out of the bathroom, he walked out and got into his truck. When he began pulling out of the driveway, he continued to stare at me and finally took his eyes off as he drove away. I finally felt relieved. When he had left, I told my mom about everything. She looked just as scared as I looked, so we hurried up, folding the clothes, and left. I'm entering my freshman year of high school this year, and I still get chills remembering the incident.
I'm going to tell you about the scariest thing that ever happened to me. Back then, I was living with my dad in a one-story house in a nice, quiet neighborhood. Everything was pretty normal during the day, but at night, whenever I climbed into bed and turned the lights off, I'd always hear an ominous scratching noise coming from everywhere and nowhere. Typically, it would only last a few seconds before stopping, and then I'd fall asleep. But that scratching grew louder and more frequent with each passing night. I eventually told my dad about it, but he just brushed it off, saying it was the house settling and that I should get used to it. Personally, I didn't want to get used to it, but I wasn't one to argue with my dad, so I did what he said. To block out the noise, I started sleeping with my pillow over my ears, and that seemed to help, at least for a little while. After a week, the scratching got so loud that it woke me up in the middle of the night, even with the pillow. At that point, I'd had enough. I had to find out what was making that noise and put a stop to it, or else I'd never get a decent night's sleep again. Rubbing my eyes, I sat up and listened again, placing a hand to my ear so I could figure out where it was coming from. To my surprise, the sound seemed to be coming from inside the walls, and it was moving. This startled me at first because I thought a person might be living inside the wall, possibly with bad intentions. But after thinking it over, it was probably just some raccoons or something. I climbed out of bed and followed the noise out of my room, then made my way down the hall. I had to tiptoe the entire way so I wouldn't wake my dad. If a raccoon really was crawling around inside the walls, then I could just scare it away by myself. At least, that's what I thought. The sound led me all the way down to my basement, a place I usually avoided. Whenever I went down there, I always felt uneasy, like I was being watched. I honestly wanted to go back to bed and forget the whole thing, but that scratching wasn't going away anytime soon, so I put on a brave face and opened the door. A chill ran down my spine as I peered down the stairway leading into the shadowy abyss. The scratching stopped for a second before picking back up again, almost as if whatever was causing it was now aware of my presence. For a moment, I thought I was making a big mistake going down there by myself. What if the animal was dangerous? What if it was bigger than me? I ignored those questions and scoffed at my own cowardice. I'm not scared of some dumb animal, I thought to myself, trying to be brave. All I have to do is be really sneaky and catch it by surprise. Feeling confident in my new plan, I immediately put it into action. I slowly descended the stairs in my bare feet. Surely that would be enough to quiet my footsteps, but as an extra precaution, I kept a hand over my mouth to muffle my breathing. It all proved pointless in the end. The wood creaked loudly under my feet with every step I took, making stealth pretty much impossible. So much for that idea, I thought while scampering the rest of the way down. If the creature was only vaguely aware of my presence before, then it undoubtedly knew my exact location now. The sound seemed to grow more frantic the closer I got to its source. I quickly followed it to a crawl space I didn't know I had. It was a small square opening in the side of a wall, just big enough for a child to squeeze through, with a little door that was slightly ajar. Since I'd already come this far, I laid flat on my stomach and crawled inside using my elbows, much like a soldier crawling under barbed wire. There was so little room that I had to stay as flat as possible to fit. It was dark and cramped, but I kept crawling until the sound suddenly disappeared. I paused for a moment, waiting for it to start again, but it never did. A little anticlimactic, but at least it had finally stopped. Before I could even think of getting out, however, I heard a loud squeak behind me. I quickly looked over my shoulder as fast as I could. To my absolute horror, a pack of rats was right behind me, blocking the way I came. I screamed and started crawling further into the tunnel as the rats gave chase, hungrily snapping their teeth at my feet. I didn't get very far though, because I soon reached a dead end. I rolled onto my back and watched helplessly as the rats approached me. I quickly raised both of my bare feet off the floor and bent my knees, preparing to kick them if they got too close.
"Stay back, or else!"
I stuttered, but the rats weren't scared of me in the slightest. And why would they be? Nosy little girls in pajamas probably wouldn't come down there very often, so I must have looked like a juicy all-you-can-eat buffet. Tears ran down my cheeks as I lay there, trembling, bare feet still raised in the air, waiting for them to attack. It felt like hours, but really it was only a minute or two. As if to taunt me, the rats kept snapping their teeth the closer they got to my bare soles. One of them tried to bite me, so I kicked it before quickly pulling my foot back. That must have angered them, because without warning, they all lunged at me, and that's when I screamed at the top of my lungs while kicking wildly. In an instant, I was swarmed by claws, teeth, and fur. They bit into every inch of exposed skin they could find. Arms, legs, feet, everywhere. I tried to defend myself, but it was like fighting an ocean. I was only saved when my dad came running into the basement with a baseball bat after hearing me scream.
"Where are you?"
He shouted with a fatherly concern.
"In here!"
I cried out while fighting off the rodents as best I could. The rats must have been startled by my dad's yelling and thunderous footsteps, because they immediately scurried away, leaving me covered in scratches and bites from head to toe. My dad got me out of the crawl space and took me to a hospital to get bandaged up and to get a tetanus shot. I was still shaken by what I had experienced, but also relieved to be alive. My dad apologized to me 1,000 times while I recovered in the hospital bed, saying he should have taken me seriously, and I forgave him. He called an exterminator the next morning to gas the whole house. My dad and I had to spend a week in a hotel before returning home, and when we did, we never heard any more scratching inside the walls. Years have passed since then, but I'll never forget that awful sensation of being swarmed by rats trying to eat me alive.
It was a Monday night in San Diego, California. I was driving back from my girlfriend's house. Just for a little context, I'd gone over to spend some quality time with her. We laughed, drank, talked about love, typical 21-year-old relationship stuff. As always, we turned on the TV to bond over something we weirdly both enjoyed, the news. I know, not the usual bonding material, but it worked for us. At first, it was the same dry stories about politics and government nonsense. Just as we were about to turn it off and call it a night, a breaking news alert came on. A young girl, around 7 years old, had gone missing. She was last seen at a nearby playground, according to her frantic aunt. Now, where I'm from, kidnappings aren't common. So when we heard that, it hit me hard, left me with chills. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, it was already 1 a.m. I had work the next morning, so I kissed my girlfriend goodnight, got in my old 2000 Ford Ranger, and started it up. As soon as I turned the key, the check engine light came on. Whatever, I muttered. The light had been on and off for years. I pulled out of her driveway and headed off. That's when things started to get weird. I was about 60 miles from my usual gas station, running low on fuel and driving on a dark, isolated road. No streetlights, no cars, nothing but the dim glow of my headlights cutting through the blackness. Then I saw something up ahead. At first, it was just a shadow, a tall, unmoving figure. I figured it had to be a tree or a sign, but as it got closer, my gut told me otherwise. About 6 feet from my truck, I slammed on the brakes. It wasn't a tree. It was something else. What I saw still haunts me. Standing in front of me was a towering creature, easily 8 feet tall. It had multiple horns sprouting from its head and jet black, empty eyes. A long, twisted grin stretched across its face, exposing blood-soaked teeth. Its body was static, like a broken TV signal, flickering and shifting. All I could clearly make out were its claws, long, razor sharp, and dripping with blood. And beside it stood a little girl. She was wearing a pink dress, stained red. Blood dripped from where her face should have been. It was just gone, skin torn away, nothing but gore and darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Then the creature slowly lifted its arm, extended a claw, and pointed directly at me. That's the last thing I remember. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed. It was 7 a.m. The nurse told me I'd been found unconscious in my running truck parked on the side of the road. After she left, I tried to piece everything together. My head was spinning. Above me was a TV. I grabbed the remote and flipped it on, tuning into the same news station. The anchor's voice made my stomach turn. We're following up on last night's breaking story here in San Diego. A 7-year-old girl was found dead early this morning at a local park. Her body was discovered beneath a swing set, covered in blood. We warn viewers, this information is graphic. Paramedics report the child's face appeared to have been completely removed, likely by a wild animal. I threw up on myself right then and there. A week later, I traded in that old Ford Ranger for a used Honda Civic. I haven't driven to my girlfriend's house since that night, and when I do visit, it's only during the day, and I always take a different route home. But I needed answers. I started digging online, desperate to understand what I saw. I know it sounds crazy, but I searched for demons, haunted places, anything. Eventually, I came across a website listing the most haunted locations in San Diego. I scrolled past creepy stories about abandoned houses and haunted lakes until one article stopped me cold. Haunted park near Mira Mesa. That's where my girlfriend lives. I kept reading. The article described multiple reports of children disappearing from that very park over the years, only to be found the next morning, dismembered, or worse. It mentioned a legend dating back to the 1950s. A man had reportedly summoned a demonic force at that same park, and ever since, strange sightings and deaths have been reported. I felt my body go cold. Every hair stood on end. And now, right now as I write this, I swear I hear whispers outside my window. They're getting louder. Oh God, I can see it. That same horned, flickering creature is standing outside. It's smiling at me.
My name is Jessica. 5 years ago, when I was 12 years old, something happened that changed my family's life forever. To this day, no one has found an answer. It started out at my aunt's house. We were all invited over. Their old, sprawling home sat in one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. It was a 2-story house with a large backyard, countless rooms, and a dark basement that none of the kids dared to enter. The house smelled of old wood and dampness. The windows were always half open, and the curtains kept the rooms dim even during the day. All of the adults were gathered in the living room, drinking tea, eating fruit, and chatting. The kids were free to do whatever we wanted. My aunt's daughter, Angela, and my uncle's daughter, Alice, were both 8 years old and completely obsessed with hide and seek. They started playing right after lunch. At first, Alice hid while Angela searched. Angela was surprisingly good at finding people, and every time Alice thought she found the perfect hiding spot, Angela would discover her within minutes. Eventually, it was Angela's turn to hide. Before running off, she laughed and told Alice,
"This time, you won't find me."
Alice closed her eyes and began counting to 30. The moment she started counting, Angela ran out of the room. I was sitting on the couch watching a movie, but every now and then, I glanced over at them. 30 seconds passed. Alice opened her eyes and started searching. She checked the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the closets, and then she went upstairs. I could hear her footsteps echoing across the old wooden floorboards. Every few minutes, she would shout,
"Angela, I found you!"
but no answer ever came. 30 minutes passed. Alice finally came downstairs. Her face was red and she was sweating. She walked up to Angela's mom and said in a shaky voice,
"Mom, I can't find Angela. I looked everywhere."
Angela's mother laughed. The adults were still busy talking and didn't think much of it. Another 30 minutes passed. Alice was starting to cry. Now some of the adults got up to help. They opened every door, looked under beds, checked closets, searched the backyard, the garage, everywhere. There was no sign of Angela. Then it was time for everyone to leave. Angela's father stood up and called out loudly,
Angela, sweetheart, come out. We're leaving now.
The house fell silent. No answer. That was the moment everyone realized something was seriously wrong. The search became frantic. Every room was checked again. Every closet, every cabinet, every possible hiding place. They even unlocked and searched the basement, a place that was normally off limits. Nothing. No sounds, no footprints, no toys, no clothing, no sign that Angela had ever been there. The police were called. Tracking dogs were brought in. They searched the entire neighborhood. Officers combed through nearby streets, yards, and abandoned buildings. Local news stations even covered the disappearance, but no clues were ever found. It was as if Angela had simply vanished the moment she went to hide. 5 years have passed. Angela is still missing. Sometimes I dream about her. In those dreams, I hear her voice calling to me from somewhere dark, a closet, the basement, sometimes from behind a closed door. She always says the same thing.
"Find me."
But whenever I reach her and pull the door open, I only see a shadow, and then it fades away. Alice barely speaks anymore. Angela's mother still bakes a birthday cake every year and lights candles for her daughter. She never misses a birthday. My aunt's house has never felt the same since that day. Most people simply refer to it as the incident. But those of us who were there know something about that day felt terribly wrong. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if Angela was never really found because she never left. Maybe she's still hiding somewhere inside that old house. And maybe she doesn't want to be found anymore.
Hello, Wansi. I've always loved scary stories, but I never imagined I would experience something like that myself. It happened about 12 months ago, and just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. That day was like any other. At least that's what I thought at the time. My parents and older brothers had gone to work, and I was home with my 2 younger sisters. They were playing with toys in another room. I was comfortably immersed in the chilling atmosphere while watching your horror videos when I suddenly heard something. It was a whisper. It was faint, but I could hear it clearly. Come here. Come here. At first I thought I'd misheard, but then I heard the sound again. Soft, almost broken. It sounded like the voice of someone who hadn't spoken for a long time. My sisters didn't notice anything. They continued playing as if nothing had happened, but I jumped up, my heart pounding, and went upstairs. Our kitchen was upstairs. The moment I stepped onto the last step, I heard the sound of something being chewed. It was a very loud sound. And then I saw her, a woman. No, she was closer to a shadow than a woman. Her gray hair, reduced to nothing but bones, covered her face. She stood in front of an open refrigerator, eating raw meat with her bare hands. Blood was dripping from her mouth, and she turned around and looked at me. Her eyes were a cold, hazy blue, as if they'd seen too much. Blood stained her lips, and she wore a chilling smile. It was a twisted, terrifying smile. I screamed. I slammed the kitchen door shut and ran downstairs. My siblings ran toward me crying, and then everything went dark. I lost consciousness. Our neighbor heard the scream and ran into the house. He saw the woman too. She was staring at us with a knife in her hand, her mouth still covered in blood. The police arrived soon, and she was arrested. We later found out she was a mentally unstable homeless person who had entered through an unlocked door while we were distracted. I was so engrossed in scary stories that I didn't even realize someone had broken into the house. But what was the most horrific part? Even now, when I close my eyes, that woman comes to mind. That face, those empty eyes, that blood-stained smile.
This happened one summer, about 2 years ago. I had just graduated from college, and I was on my way to a friend's place to drink and party. As I drove along the highway, the sky grew dark before I realized it, so I pressed it down on the gas, hoping to get there faster. At the same time, I was buzzing with excitement, thinking about all the fun my friend and I were going to have that night. Before I knew it, the moonlight was illuminating the road, and dense forest stretched out on both sides. There were hardly any cars around. When I saw a sign for a rest area, I decided to pull in and grab a quick snack. The moment I stepped out of my car, something caught my eye. A man was standing nearby, staring at me. I froze for a second, but tried my best to act casual. He stood in a dark corner, his face hidden behind thick black hair. In his hand, he held something that looked like a metal pipe. He lifted it to his mouth like a microphone and began humming a strange tune I couldn't quite make out. Assuming he was just some weirdo, I hurried past him and headed toward the convenience store. Even after I reached the entrance and glanced back, he was still standing there, watching me. As I entered the store, I noticed the clerk was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I could hear someone humming softly, somewhere between the aisles. By that point, I knew something felt wrong. I quickly grabbed an energy drink and headed for the exit. Then, a loud bang slammed against the glass door behind me. I spun around. The man from outside was opening the door and stepping into the store. Under the bright lights, I could finally see him clearly. He was tall, and his hands were covered in scars. Slowly, he started walking toward me, gripping the metal pipe. Then he spoke. "Your screams will make our song complete. We needed another instrument, and then you showed up." As he stared at me, his eyes moved up and down my body, sizing me up, and as they did, his humming grew louder. The clerk was still nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, the person hidden somewhere between the shelves continued humming as well. The two sounds blended together in a disturbingly perfect harmony. My heart nearly stopped. Then it began pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. The man's footsteps seemed almost rhythmic, like he was moving to the beat of some invisible song. Then he pulled out his phone. He tapped something on the screen and held it up for me to see. A voice recorder app was running. Next, he set the phone down on a nearby shelf. Then he gripped the metal pipe with both hands and took a stance like he was preparing to swing it. At that moment, the air seemed to freeze. I ran. I bolted for the door and sprinted out of the store. Seconds later, he came charging after me. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and slammed my foot on the gas pedal. As I sped away, I saw him climb into a truck that had been parked in a dark corner of the lot. Then he came after me. The truck raced onto the highway behind me. As he drove, he leaned his head out the driver's side window and screamed in an impossibly high-pitched voice. My hands shook violently on the steering wheel, but I kept driving as fast as I could. Eventually, the truck grew smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror. Then it disappeared completely. It took a long time for the shaking to stop. The entire drive afterward felt unreal. Thoughts poured through my head non-stop. The strangest part was that I never saw a single employee in that store. I still don't know whether the person humming between the shelves was actually a clerk or someone else entirely. It was well past midnight when I finally arrived at my friend's house. Still shaken and half-dazed, I told him everything that happened. He was horrified. He told me I should call the police immediately, but by then, I felt like it was already too late. Since that night, the man has appeared in my dreams from time to time. In those dreams, he always catches me, and he always beats me. I wake up every time, fighting the urge to scream, and the tune he was humming, it never really left me. Even now, I can still hear it playing over and over in my head, like a song that refuses to end.